Hey there, Patriots. Welcome back to the front lines. This is Death Watch here to give you guys more intel so you can update your personal armory and fight back against the fake news media machine. And today we'll be discussing the kind of issue around, again, heel versus babyface in the ideas of pronouns in a video game, right? Because what I said previously is that the whole issue surrounding pronouns is essentially the normalization of left wing activist rhetoric, right? No one outside of the left wing activist spaces actually discuss in matters of pronouns, right? What is your preferred pronouns, right? Those are not concepts that you actually hear about or see in the real world, okay? Only in these academic leftist spaces do you actually see people who identify as non binary or gender fluid, or hear people referring to themselves as opposite pronouns of what most people would consider them to be, right? You go to outside to the average human being, right? You see a guy, you say, "Excuse me, sir," right? The guy will turn around and say, "Yes, what do you want?" You see a random lady on the street, you say, "Excuse me, ma'am." She'll turn around and say, "Yes, what do you need?" Because nobody sits down and says, "Oh, excuse me, do you ask what my pronouns are before you started talking to me or whatever, or before you refer to me in a with gendered language?" No, nobody does. Only leftist activists who are trying to demand you bend the knee to their ideology care about that type of crap, right? So when you see this type of rhetoric pop up in video games, of course people are going to sit down and say, this is clearly a game that is pandering to a left wing activist demographic. Okay. Or they're trying to be, or they're trying to virtue signal to this type of crowd, right? And so when it comes to heel versus babyface and mainly his detractors, right? People are trying to attack him as a man child for complaining about this. It's like, no, this is an actual argument to be had because these leftists, they want this, right? They have been pushing for years to have their ideological worldview represented in video games. The whole point of Gamergate with Anita Sarkeesian was because she was and well, she still is a far left radical feminist who was during the age, back during 2011, 2012, she was a part of the bigger push was feminism, right? Dirt wave feminism, which was demanding that, hey, we have more female politicians, we have more women in positions of power, we have more women in managerial positions, right? And when it came to the video game pop culture space, you saw how overtly these spaces were devoid of politics, right? People were overtly just like, no, we don't care about your politics. We just want to play video games, right? It was a majority male dominated space, right? And so, of course, feminists who are trying to push political agenda in the mainstream, they saw, hey, there are essentially pockets of different subcultures, such as pop culture, where men are overtly gathering and trying to push away any type of political anything, right? Any type of political activism in those spaces were immediately shut down and kicked out. Surprise, surprise, Anita Sarkeesian immediately tried to target these spaces, drew feminist frequency in her entire was a video game series called Tropes versus Women in Video Games. Okay, and how did she, how was she able to break into those bubbles? How was she able to break into these spaces? Because when you look at the overt idea of academia, a lot of these individuals who are now working at these game industries all went to college, went to these liberal arts colleges, went to these fine art colleges where these types of conversations of misogyny and sexism and feminist activism were heavily discussed. And now these individuals are working at these industries, right? You saw how overtly people who were political activists working in different fields of journalism were taking her talking points and pushing it and trying to defame these video game spaces. And these game developing companies were being told by these video game journalists that, hey, you must abide by this new feminist activist push in order to dispel this type of crowd of misogynists and sexists, and then they started going on to say, well, these people are all a bunch of evil white people who are clearly trying to make spaces devoid of any women and minorities, right? That was the main tactic that they used, right, over the years to try to deface the pop culture space. Okay, and it worked because again, a lot of these leftists, a lot of these game developers, a lot of these people who work in these industries, all go to the same liberal arts colleges, right? They all believe and subscribe to the same leftist agenda, and of course, they would all bend the knee to this new wave feminist rhetoric and change up their whole entire formulas, right? Look at this. A lot of people forget about this meme from BuzzFeed Yellow, right? This lady right here says, I wrote a blog about a post a while ago about why I hate video games because this is what it does. It appeals to the male fantasy. Anita Sarkeesian and Feminist Frequency constantly push that that idea that, hey, you video game companies out there, or not just video game companies, video comic book spaces, right? Comic book companies, right? Every single media outlet that essentially fueled the pop culture space, you all are essentially creating or curating a kind of essentially a field of evil white men being a bunch of misogynists, racists, and all this other crap, right? Isms and phobics, right? And it's really hard for women and minorities to get a foothold in these types of community spaces because a bunch of evil white men are trying to gatekeep us out of it, right? And so, of course, mainstream media like Fox News, CNN, MSNBC picked up these stories because they always had a bone to pick with video games in general, right? They always had a kind of they always had a hard on for it, right? Because they always wanted to make some type of argument, right? Like what was the old arguments, right? If you play violent video games, you will go out and do violent things in real life, right? Studies have already proven that that's not true. Okay, Anita Sarkeesian and all these other feminists then just took that exact same argument and said that, well, if you play games like GTA 5 where you can have relationships with sex workers and you can do bad things to women in these video games, well, therefore you are going to do bad things to women in the real life. That's why feminists or feminism needs to be pushed heavily in these spaces, right? That was the overt argument that these feminists tried to use, and that was successful because all of these other industries subscribe to that type of left-wing political ideology, right? Which made it easier for them to implement and allow these infiltrators to essentially destroy pop culture, okay? So really what the kind of crux of this whole entire video is that people who hated video games, people who hate video games, people who always hated pop culture are now in charge of these spaces. So when you see overtly left-wing rhetoric, left-wing politics being pushed in these video games, and you as a libertarian or a conservative come out and say, I don't like this, quit pushing your Californian-style politics in my video games, of course these leftists are going to come out and say, you're just a man baby, because they want it. They want it. They've been pushing for their ideology to be reflected in these spaces for years now. Okay, and they're finally starting to see it actually be reflected. Okay, in some cases, like with Saints Row, the new Saints Row and Volition, it is costing them money, right? Get woke, go broke, right? That company is now out of business, and several other media outlets are starting to see that people aren't showing up for their movies. People are not buying their comic books because of this, right? So when Heel versus Babyface comes out and says, I don't like the fact that there's left-wing rhetoric in my video game, well, of course, these leftists are going to sit here and say, you're just a big man baby, despite the fact that all of these people like Anita Sarkeesian and all the people in Gamergate did the exact same thing years ago. Cry, scream, wet themselves because how dare you men play video games where there's attractive, sexy women in these being displayed in these in this media space, right? How dare you guys do this, right? We're trying to push far left feminist agenda in the mainstream, and you guys are ignoring us. So therefore, we're going to invade your space and force you guys to play along with our feminist agenda. It's nothing new, nothing different, right? And so my kind of demand here from people who overtly say we are tired of this crap is to sit down and just say, hey, we don't want to play these games. Just keep doing what you've been doing. Just boycott. Don't do what the people in Hogwarts Legacy did, where they overtly went out and harassed and attacked people for playing a game because they disagree with J.K. Rowling's politics, which is, to say the least, J.K. Rowling is sane, right? Her politics is, sane politics, right? These radicals are radicals for a reason. Okay. However, just overtly say, hey, yeah, we don't like California politics. We don't care for California politics. We want actual video games that actually show and display traditional masculine stories, power fantasies that appeal to male audiences, right? And if it isn't that, well, then we don't care for it, right? There is no need for beating around the bush or trying to be PC about it, right? Just overtly say, I don't care for left wing politics. I don't agree with it. And if I see a game that has people who overtly agree with that type of politics, I'm not going to play it, because leftists do that to you. Okay. This kind of idea of, well, we need to take the higher ground or whatever, right? Or the higher moral ground or whatever, right? It's stupid, right? No, no, no. Just overtly, just stand up and say, if there's a game that clearly is meant to kind of court the far left, we're not going to play it. We don't care for it. We're not going to play it. If there's a mod for a game that overtly makes a game better, right? Such as with Street Fighter 6 that's out right now. There's a lot of mods that's coming out to make the women more bodacious, wear more skimpy clothing, whatever, right? Or with Baldur's Gate 3, people are putting out mods to make the women look more attractive, right? So you can basically customize these female characters the way that you want them to look, right? And people are drawing hissy fits about that because they're like, well, how dare you make these women look more sexier, right? That's sexist and misogynist. It's like, we don't care. It's a mod. We're going to download the mod. We're going to play the game how we want to play it, right? Screw you, right? Just be more upfront about it, right? That's all I'm saying. It's just, we just need to be more upfront about it, because these individuals like Anita Sarkeesian and the rest of these people, who are part of Gamergate, they overtly push their own agenda in these video game spaces because they did not like how games were being played. How dare you play games in that type of manner? We don't like it because it doesn't appeal to the feminist cause. So therefore, we're going to attack it. We're going to label you guys as a bunch of isms and phobics in order to force these companies to bend to our will. That's what they did. And now we need to do basically just do the same thing back to them. Say, hey, if these games don't appeal to what we want, well, then we're not going to buy it. We're not going to buy it. We're not going to play it. If these games appeal to the left wing political California politics, we don't want it. We're gonna scream about it. We're gonna say this game is trash. We're gonna say this game is boring. Yeah, we're just gonna say that this game is dumb. Right? Why not? Why not? Tell me. Right? Because again, these leftists overtly do it to us. Why not do it back to them? It's as simple as that. And so, like always, stay safe, stay sane, be vigilant, like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you, Patriots, on the battlefield.